Good evening. I'm Haley Ficasello, and this is Englebrook Independent News Federal Crime Report. Tonight, we're examining several significant federal criminal cases from March of 2026 across the southwestern United States, including major narcotic trafficking sentencing, cartel-linked smuggling cases, domestic violence in Indian country, child exploitation prosecutions, and a multi-million-dollar federal fraud scheme. Federal courts across the region hand down decades-long prison sentencing as prosecutors continue targeting fentanyl distribution, violent offenders, and transnational criminal organizations. We begin tonight in Montana, where federal prosecutors secure multiple major drug trafficking convictions. A Washington state man convicted of drug trafficking and firearm charges has been sentenced to more than 16 years in federal prison, followed by a jury conviction in Montana. Federal prosecutors say 32-year-old Felipe Michael Garza was sentenced to 194 months in prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release by U.S. District Judge Donald W. Molly. Garza was convicted in November of 2025 on 3 felony counts: possession with intent to distribute controlled substance, possession of a firearm in furtherance of drug trafficking crime, and prohibited person in possession of a firearm. Court evidence showed the investigation began on August 13th of 2024 when law enforcement attempted to stop Garza while he was driving a black Chevy Silverado. Garza failed to stop at a stop sign and did not have a rear license plate, prompting officers to initiate a traffic stop. Instead of pulling over normally, Garza drove onto a lawn of a residence that did not belong to him, where officers made contact. Investigators soon discovered Garza had an outstanding $1 million arrest warrant in Washington state. After being taken into custody, Garza admitted he was carrying fentanyl inside a fanny pack and had used methamphetamine approximately 2 hours before. A search of the vehicle and his belongings uncovered a substantial drug distribution operation. Officers recovered 144.8 grams of methamphetamine, 55 grams of fentanyl pills, 3 pounds of marijuana, 2 firearms stored in the vehicle console, nearly $2,400 in cash, drug scale and paraphernalia, and a notebook documenting narcotic pricings. Federal prosecutors argue the notebook provided clear evidence of organized drug distribution activity. Garza will now serve more than 16 years in federal prison. In a separate federal case, a billing man who distributed methamphetamine has been sentenced to 10 years in prison. 43-year-old Logan Scott Bergen pled guilty to possession with the intent to distribute methamphetamine. U.S. District Judge Susan P. Waters imposed a sentence of 120 months in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. Investigators say Bergen was running a local drug distribution operation while living inside a camper in Billings. Law enforcement began investigating after receiving multiple tips in May of 2024 that Bergen was selling methamphetamine and conducting transactions through Cash App. A search of the camper revealed more than 100 grams of methamphetamine, 2 pistols, 2 shotguns, and ammunition. One woman present at the camper told officers she had arrived to purchase fentanyl. Authorities also linked Bergen to an earlier investigation after a search of Billings motel room uncovered drugs and $2,500 in cash. Search warrants of Bergen's communication revealed text messages referring to narcotics using coded language, methamphetamine referred to as clear, fentanyl referred to as blue or blue skies. Drug trafficking cases were not limited to Montana. In South Dakota, federal prosecutors secured 2 lengthy sentences tied to fentanyl and methamphetamine distribution. A Sussex Falls woman who distributed fentanyl that resulted in a fatal overdose has been sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. 33-year-old Anastasia Muggins pled guilty to distribution of controlled substance resulting in a death. U.S. District Judge Karen E. Shisher imposed the sentence on March 2nd of 2026. The case stemmed from the December 15th, 2024 death of Sheila Eastman, an enrolled member of the Flounder Sante Sussex tribe. Eastman was found dead inside her Sussex Falls residence. The coroner determined the cause of death was fentanyl toxicity. Federal investigators concluded Muggins had sold Eastman approximately zero point 0.1 grams of fentanyl powder, which she ingested shortly before her death. Under federal law, distributing narcotics that directly cause a fatal overdose can result in enhancement penalties of life imprisonment. Muggins was ordered to serve 20 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. In another case announced the same day, a T. South Dakota man involved in a large meth trafficking conspiracy received 16 years in federal prison. 48-year-old Sean Blanchfield pled guilty to conspiracy to distribute methamphetamine. Federal prosecutors say Blanchfield was part of a trafficking network that transported narcotics from Arizona to South Dakota. Investigators determined the organization trafficked more than 100 pounds of methamphetamine. Blanchfield alone was responsible for selling more than 8 pounds of the drugs. Judge Scherer sentenced him to 16 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. Next tonight, federal prosecutors in Oklahoma announced sentencing of two disturbing cases, one involving domestic violence in Indian country and another involving online child exploitation. A Tulsa man who admitted strangling his girlfriend in front of their child has been sentenced in federal court. 36-year-old Donnie Ray Spencer received 56 months in federal prison for assaulting of an intimate partner by strangulation. The crime occurred within Indian country jurisdiction, placing it under federal authority. Court records say Spencer was heavily intoxicated in July of 2025 when the incident occurred. After reopening stitches on his head during a fall, relatives called 911 for medical assistance. When emergency personnel arrived, Spencer became aggravated and belligerent, forcing medical responders to leave until police arrived. Officers later observed bruising on the victim's body. She told investigators Spencer had strangled her and struck her with a broom during an argument earlier that day, all in the presence of a 3-year-old child. Spencer later admitted to assaulting while being transported to the jail. He is a citizen of the Cherokee Nation and will serve his sentence in Federal Bureau of Prison. Also in Tulsa, a man who shared child sexual abuse material online has been sentenced to more than 11 years in federal prison. Walter Zachary Treat, 31, pled guilty to receipt and distribution of child pornography. The case began after the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children received a cyber tip from the messaging platform Kik. Investigators executed a search warrant of Treat's residence and seized multiple electronic devices. A forensic examination revealed 18 videos, more than 60 images of child sexual abuses. Investigators also discovered messages which Treat discussed luring children into bathrooms in order to assault them. 23 victims were identified through the National Children Victim Identification System, allowed to submit victims' impact statements to the court. U.S. District Judge Terrence C. Kern sentenced Treat to 135 months in prison and ordered $3,000 in restitution. Federal prosecutors in Kansas also announced two new criminal cases involving drug trafficking and child exploitation. A federal grand jury in Topeka indicted 44-year-old Danny Ray Stano Jr. on charges including possession of a firearm by a prohibited person and conspiracy to distribute methamphetamine. Court records allege Stano possessed 5 firearms despite being legally barred from owning weapons. If convicted, he faces significant federal prison time. Meanwhile, in Wichita, a former Kansas high school wrestling coach has been charged with producing child sexual abuse material. 37-year-old Ryan Bungdart of Celina faces 2 counts of production of child pornography and 1 count of attempted production. Investigators say Bungdart used a cell phone to secretly record minors showering in a locker room during January 2024 wrestling tournament at Newen High School. Bungdart made his initial appearance in federal court on March 4th of 2026. A detention hearing followed days later as the case moved forward. Federal prosecutors in Texas announced a sentence in 2 cases tied to transnational criminal activity. In Houston, a 26-year-old Mexican national, Andres Reyes Morales, received 12 years in federal prison for methamphetamine trafficking. Investigators identified Reyes Morales as a member of the transnational criminal organization responsible for moving methamphetamine from Mexico into South Texas and Houston. During an undercover investigation, authorities purchased 5 kilograms of methamphetamine from Reyes Morales. A later search of his home uncovered 1 kilogram of methamphetamine hidden in a shoebox. After serving his sentence, Reyes Morales will face removal proceedings from the United States. In Laredo, another Mexican national was sentenced for human smuggling that resulted in a death. 24-year-old Alejandro Hernandez Alacudo received 70 months in federal prison. Authorities say Hernandez helped guide migrants across the Rio Grande and through the remote bushes near El Ciso, Texas. During one smuggling attempt, the group ran out of the water in extreme heat. Temperatures ranged from 93 to 106 degrees. When one migrant became ill, Hernandez allegedly abandoned him in the bushes while continuing to lead the others. The victim, a 37-year-old Mexican national, later died from heat stroke. Investigators say Hernandez admitted to working under orders linked to the cartel-linked. Federal prosecutors in Colorado secured multiple convictions involving fentanyl distribution and pandemic-era fraud. Two Colorado Spring residents were sentenced after selling fentanyl pills linked to multiple overdose deaths. Thomas Galano III received 12 years in federal prison, while Haley Ann Helton received 14 years. Investigators connected the pair to at least two fatal overdoses involving counterfeit M30 fentanyl pills. In a third case, undercover officers purchased 16 fentanyl pills for $150 directly from the pair during a controlled buy. In another major case, 34-year-old Adrio Salco of Philadelphia was sentenced to 78 months in prison. Prosecutors say Salco participated in an international fraud conspiracy that stole more than $5 million from pandemic relief programs. The scheme targeted Paycheck Protection Program loans, economic injury and disaster loans, and state unemployment benefits. Investigators say Salco laundered fraud proceeds through the international transfer to China and Nigeria, collecting roughly 25% of the fees. He was also ordered to pay $2.58 million in restitution. These cases represent just a portion of the federal prosecution underway across the Southwest, where investigators continue targeting drug trafficking networks, violent offenders, financial fraud, and child exploitation crimes. For Englebrook Independent News, I'm Haley Ficasello.